Hi, this is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. Today is November 19th, 2021, Friday, and I'm at my standing desk. I'm standing up so that when I stand up to record, I think there's a little more energy. Maybe the diaphragm is getting a little more air to the voice. But anyway, good to be back with you. It's been almost a month since I put up the episode that included the conversation with my father. Thank you for the comments I received on that. This episode, as it happens, occurs on the 14th anniversary of the introduction of the Kindle on November 19th, 2007. Jeff Bezos made an appearance in New York City to hold up this strange tablet device that probably many of you listening to this remember the original Kindle that had this strange roll mechanism that moved up and down the side of the page to I can't even remember how that worked. I just remember that it was odd, but that you could read books on it and you could highlight, and there was Kindle Direct Publishing was announced that same day, and it was a big breakthrough, pretty amazing. And you could buy bestsellers and new releases for $9.99. I was pretty excited about it, although having been burned on the Rocketbook, which had been introduced, I think about 3 years before that. And I thought, boy, that was the future of reading, and it turned out not to be so. And that made me not jump out and get a Kindle the first 6 hours that it was available. And so I missed out that it was out of stock for quite a while. But it wasn't too long after that, July of the following year, was when I started the Kindle Chronicles, episode 1, on July 26th of 2008. And we're still going, not every week as we were up until this past summer. And it's been busy in my life and the space that's opened up by going off the weekly podcast schedule. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that at the end of the show. What I want to do in this episode is recall a little bit about the launch of the Kindle in 2007, and then move on to compare the Paperwhite 11th generation, the new Paperwhite that was introduced September 21st of this year, with the Kindle Oasis, which is the top of the line of the three Kindle models: Basic, Kindle, Paperwhite, and Oasis. And the way I'm going to walk through that is I'll have 8 questions that I'm going to answer about the Paperwhite 11, and then I'll give you a summary on what I think of the two models. It's been intriguing to me. I've used them for almost a couple of months now, and have gone back and forth. Which one do I prefer? Well, by the end of this episode, you'll find out. As we turn the clock back to November of 2007, I was not at that event. All the other Kindle-related events after that I was attended in one way or the other. It's fun to recall that 90,000 books were available on the launch day. And also that Kindle Direct Publishing started right out at the first day, enabling authors to earn 70% royalties on books that they publish on the Kindle using KDP. The price was impressive, $399 for that very crude first version of the Kindle. It had been created, it took 3 years of development by Lab 126, which was created in 2004. Jeff Bezos gave the engineers a really tough task, which was to be able to download books without using a cable. And the Sony ebook reader at that time was a fairly nice device, good for reading, but you had to plug it into a computer to get your books. And that turned out just to be something that was so less desirable than to be able to do it wirelessly. And Bezos built in the 3G capability or the cellular capability, whatever it was, to be able to do that wirelessly. In doing a little reading just now, that Rocketbook, which is the one that I fell in love with, the makers of the Rocketbook approached Amazon in 1997 for funding, and Bezos was impressed with it, but he wanted exclusivity. He wanted to control the platform and the device. They went to Barnes & Noble. I'm not sure if they ever actually made a deal with Barnes & Noble. I don't think that's where the Nook came from. But he saw what Apple had done with music, completely dominating the music space with the iPod, and that's where he had the idea that for ebooks, the price $9.99 kind of echoed the 99-cent price for songs in the iTunes store. And once the second version of the Kindle was introduced in the fall of 2009, by that time Amazon had a 90% share of the digital reading market, and that dominance of ebooks has held up ever since over the past 14 years. And now comes the Paperwhite 11th generation. I call it the Paperwhite 11. Introduced September 21st. It has a 6.8-inch screen, so it's a bigger screen than the previous Paperwhite. It's not quite as big as the Oasis screen, which is 7 inches, and I'll talk about that later. For $140, you can get the ad-supported model with 8 gigabytes. It has a USB-C charging port, which I like. That tends to be what most of my stuff is on now. And it has adjustable warm light. At night, I like to turn up the kind of soft light for reading in bed. During the day, the black and white light seems to be more appropriate. So that's a nice feature. There is a Signature Edition for $190 that has 32 gigabytes and wireless charging, which I'll talk about. And there's also a Paperwhite Kids model, which has a kid-friendly cover, and it comes with 1 year of Amazon Kids, the content subscription source of content for kids, and a 2-year worry-free guarantee. You can the Paperwhite Kids can get dropped and stomped on and eaten by the dog, and they'll replace it or take care of it for you. As I say, I've been using the Paperwhite 11 for close to a couple of months. I got a review copy from Amazon, and I bought one for myself. And I've just taken my time figuring out what I think of it. And here are the 8 questions that I'm going to answer as a way to share my observations with you. 1, is the Oasis worth paying roughly $100 more than the Paperwhite? 2, which is the best cover for the Paperwhite? 3, is the Paperwhite Signature worth paying $50 more than the regular Paperwhite? 4, which of these e-readers feels best in the hand, the Paperwhite or the Oasis? How important are physical buttons for the next page and the previous page? Is the accelerometer the killer feature of the Oasis? 7, is wireless charging lame, or is it something that makes it worthwhile to get the Signature? And 8, what difference does 0.2 of an inch make in the size of the screen, 6.8 inches diagonal versus 7? So let's go back and consider these questions. One that I've been asked a fair amount in the interim from listeners is the Oasis worth paying roughly $100 more than the Paperwhite 11? And it depends. It depends on what features are important to you. The big distinction between the Paperwhite and the Oasis is that the Oasis has physical buttons. In other words, I'm holding my Oasis now, and if I hold it in my right hand, my right thumb can touch a button for the next page or the previous page. And then the other thing it has is an accelerometer. So if I switch it around to my left hand, it realigns itself, and now my left thumb has got easy access to those buttons. I've generally been a fan of the buttons. I think I recall saying I don't like touching the page because I want to disappear into that page of text as I'm reading. And if I'm touching the page, somehow there's a little bit of transgression on that space, the disappearing space that Jeff Bezos talked about right from the start of the Kindle. So keeping the thumb off of the page, I've thought I liked. I have to say that using the Paperwhite over the past month or so, I don't feel quite the same way about that. The advantage of having a physical button is not as apparent to me. And the size of the Paperwhite I like because it feels more like the size of a book. The Oasis has got sort of a square look to it. I'm holding the Paperwhite in my right hand and the Oasis in my left hand. And the Oasis is more like a square, which is not what you're used to with a book, especially a paperback book. But, a book is like a rectangle. It's an oblong. And when I'm holding this Paperwhite, it evokes that basic shape of the book better than the Oasis does. And it's strange what kinds of things make me more drawn to one than the other. But as I've thought about it, I think that's kind of basic to it. And then the other thing is that the Oasis has two widths to it. Part of it has got a thicker side to it and then a thinner side to it. This goes back to the original Oasis when it had this very odd two-part battery, and the new one has done away with that, which I'm glad of, but it's not as smooth on the back as the Paperwhite is. The Paperwhite's just a very simple slab, and the Oasis has got some irregularity to it. The Oasis is slightly lighter, and that makes a difference. The Oasis weighs 6.6 ounces, and the Paperwhite weighs 7.23. You can kind of feel that much difference, and that goes to question number 4: how do they feel in the hand? So, the answer to is it worth paying $100 more for the Paperwhite 11? I think it's pretty much come down to taste. You can't just say, oh, this is the better e-reader, because that will depend on what's important to you and how they feel in the hand, and a lot of very nuanced kind of the aesthetic issues go into that, because the technology is so similar. The screens are very similar. I think there's a little higher resolution on the Oasis, but they've both got these front lit screens and different color screens. You feel like you're very much using the same technology, but it's just kind of in a different package. Covers are always important to me. So my second question is, which is the best cover for the Paperwhite? It took a while before the one that I knew I wanted arrived, and I have it now. And it's an origami cover, so that when it folds over, and I've had this on the Oasis for years, and I really enjoy it, but now I have it for the Paperwhite. So it has a nice leatherish look to it and kind of a traditional design. It's the one I bought was made by Moko, M-O-K-O. It's only $24. I did have to pay $9.48 for shipping. But when I open it up, the cover just folds back and it snaps into place magnetically. But the big advantage is, if you look at the cover, it has these folding lines, and it takes a little while to get used to doing it quickly, but I can now just fold that cover so that it turns into a stand, and it attaches magnetically, so that if I put the Paperwhite on my desk right here in front of me, it's facing me. It's got a nice angle so that it's not like straight up and down. It kind of leans back. And I love this for when I'm at a coffee shop. I can read it. I can just set it up there. And with this kind of an origami stand, I don't have to touch it with my hands at all. So I think that this is really the best cover, in my opinion, for the Paperwhite. There's a similar one that I have for the Oasis. It's made by Finty. Same principle. It's an origami cover that folds into itself in a way that creates a stand. And so I think that's, and you can use a Kindle without a cover, but I think protecting the screen is a good idea, and holding something that's got a little leathery feel to it, that gives you some old-timey book feeling to it, so that you're just not carrying around this slab of glass and plastic. Third question has to do with the Signature Edition of the Paperwhite 11. It costs $50 more, and it has 32 gigabytes more storage, 8 in the basic Paperwhite and 32 gigabytes in the Signature Edition. That, frankly, doesn't make much difference to me, I don't think, because I generally just keep the books on my Kindle that I'm reading, and when I get through with a book, I put it back into my archive. So I'm not carrying hundreds of books on my Kindle, and 8 gigabytes holds a lot of books. So I don't think that's really much of a draw for me to spend $50 more. It also has auto-adjusting light sensors. What does that mean? I don't know. I always adjust the light to what I want, so I don't really see that as a plus. The one that I'm tempted to say I like maybe enough to spend $50 more is the wireless charging. I found out that I could charge the Paperwhite Signature with the round mag charger for my iPhone. It was a little funky because I had to move the round thing around the back of the Kindle in a way before I found the spot where it was actually charging. So it wasn't really that smooth. There's a charger that you can get that is made for Amazon, and it makes it like a stand. So it's made by Anchor. It costs $30, and that looks like it might be something that if you want to use it as a stand, you could, but I like the cover that folds up with the origami folding better than that. So I don't know. I think wireless charging is certainly the future, and that could be, in addition to the more storage, possibly worth more than $50 more. But in general, I would say no. I don't think the Signature model is worth paying $50 more than the basic one. How they feel in the hand, I mentioned the difference in weight. The Paperwhite is a little bit heavier, but the Oasis has got this kind of odd square to it. And I wonder if it means that the center of gravity, so the Oasis is wider. I can't really describe that difference, but it's a combination of how it looks when I hold it, this square size versus the more traditional rectangular size. And I don't know. I think my hand likes simple things that kind of disappear, and by that standard, the Paperwhite feels better in the hand. 5, how important are physical buttons? I talked a little bit about that at the top. I'll have to say that the Oasis buttons are very pleasing. There have been versions of buttons, I think maybe it was the Voyage, where you really had to press the button to make it work. They were trying to avoid the click that was keeping people awake or their partners awake at night when they were clicking their buttons. If buttons are important to you, the current Oasis has the best buttons I think we've seen. And it's a nice feel. You're just pressing that button a little bit and the page goes, advances or goes back. And you don't have to remember that the touch area for the Paperwhite and also the basic Kindle, it's designed so that if you touch, there's a bigger area of the screen which will make the page go forward. And there's kind of if you're facing it, the left margin has a sort of a skinnier tap area that will make your page go to the previous page, and a bigger area for the next page. That's kind of obvious. And so with the buttons, you don't have to figure out, well, where am I supposed to touch the screen? You just touch the button that you want, and you can customize it. So if you want the lower button to be the next page because that's what you use the most often, you can change a setting to do that. Number 6, is the accelerator the killer feature of the Oasis? Now, this is interesting because with the Oasis, if you've got it, let's see, let me get my Oasis here. So I've got it, and I'm holding it in my right hand, and so the buttons are right close to my right thumb. If I want to switch to my left hand, I turn it over so that now the buttons are right next to my left thumb, and the screen has flipped because it has an accelerometer. It can tell which orientation you're putting it at. The Paperwhite doesn't have the accelerometer, so if you switch from your left hand to your right hand, your tap area is going to be different. So in other words, if I'm reading with my right hand, my right thumb, it can kind of hover over that wide part of the touch area and very easily tap to the next page. If I switch to the left hand, There's no flipping of it or accelerometer. Now my left thumb has to reach a little further over to get past that left margin, which is the previous page tap area, to get to the right, the next page tap area. So I think that's kind of an important difference and an advantage to the Oasis, that if you're switching from reading from right hand to left hand, you've got a much easier and more pleasing way to do that with the Oasis because of the accelerometer which flips the screen over. Wireless charging, number 7. I wonder if there might be different products that come out that make that more compelling. And this Apple one I said I could sort of make it work, but it was kind of difficult, kind of clunky. But eventually, I have a feeling we're just going to have wireless pads that are going to be, you can throw your iPhone on there or your watch or whatever. And in that kind of an environment where the charging pads are more ubiquitous and more universal, it could be pretty nice to have that wireless charging on the Signature Edition. The last question is, what difference does 0.2 of an inch make? I think it's intriguing that when they designed the new Paperwhite, they increased the size of the screen to 6.8 inches. It was 6 before, but they didn't go all the way to have it be 7 inches. This is the diagonal measurement. So it may be a way that you can justify paying the $100 more for the Oasis. Well, it's got a bigger screen. Okay, 0.2 of an inch on the diagonal, does that really make a difference? I don't really think so. I did do kind of a comparison of how many words on a screen could I see on one versus the other. And it's clear that there were maybe, at the font I used, there were a few more words on the page on the Oasis with that extra 0.2 of an inch on the diagonal, but essentially the same look. And I don't think that there's really a difference. And the 6.8 size gives the Paperwhite this ability to look more like a book size, and it's quite pleasant. My summary then is I think the Paperwhite 11 is going to replace my Oasis. When I'll send back the review copy, and I think I'll retire my Oasis along with a lot of my other Amazon devices. And when we travel to Florida and when I'm reading at night, I think this is going to be my go-to Kindle, the new Paperwhite 11th generation. It's simpler. It feels more like the size of a book. It doesn't feel so sort of precious. It's just the screen. It's just the book. It doesn't have buttons. It doesn't flip around the accelerator. It seems sturdier, and I like it. It's like taking the basic shape of the Paperwhite, which has always been the most popular of the Kindles, and really improving it in terms of the size of the screen, the brightness, the warm light, and all of these other things. They've squeezed as much quality out of this basic shape as is possible, to the point where I think they've succeeded, at least in my opinion, in making my new favorite Kindle compared to the Oasis. I tell you a little bit of update on what's going on in our lives. Since I talked to you last, there's been a big development, because after a year of renting in Florida in the winter and really thinking about shifting to a winter lifestyle down there, we found a house. A friend of Darlene's was out walking in the golf course area that we really enjoyed when we rented last year, and she saw a for sale by owner sign on a house. Darlene remembered the house. It was only 2 houses away from the place that we'd rented last, that was last February and March. So we flew down there last week, I think. An ordeal of a trip, flying through Chicago, getting to Fort Myers, and getting into Sanibel late at night, and then had a successful negotiation with the sellers at a price that was more than we planned to pay for a house, but I think it's a fair price, and it's a lot of house, and it's a very pleasing house. The woman was an artist, quite well known on the island, and a nice view of the golf course, including the pond where the alligator, we used to watch the alligator last year, and the broccoli tree. There was a tree that looks like a broccoli. And it's kind of in the middle of the island, so it's about a 5-minute bike ride from the Gulf side, and it's maybe a 5-minute walk to the bay side. We think that's an advantage because there was a period of red tide last year, and that was really unpleasant. I mean, dead fish on the beach and this very oppressive odor, so that you really just didn't want to go to the beach. And, if you had property on the beach, there you'd have it. I've done some thinking and worrying at 3 a.m. about climate change, and I have a date on my calendar 5 years from the closing date, which is going to be December 10th, to take a look at climate. What are we paying for storm and flood insurance? Are banks giving mortgages to properties on Sanibel? Its average elevation is 3 feet. And so on every map that I look at that shows the possible effect of rising oceans on Florida, Miami's underwater, and so is Sanibel. So this is something that if I were in my 20s, I don't think it would make much sense to buy a house in a place that has gets so much exposure to the effects of climate change. But, I'm 71, and the way this island has been calling to our hearts, I think makes it a logical and an emotionally smart choice for us. So we're going full steam ahead, and passed the inspection pretty well. There might be some issues with the roof that the sellers are going to fix, but when we go down, we thought we had rentals all signed up for 4 months, and I've canceled all the rentals. So instead of stepping into a rental when we get down there in December, we'll be walking into the home that we will have purchased by then. And I hope I'll have some shows for you from Sanibel. I checked the acoustics in the bedroom, which will also be my office, and they sound pretty good, so be a good place to record. And Deb will be with us. We'll have some guests coming down, and it's going to be an exciting year that kind of follows the arc of a dream that we've had for probably 3 years now of selling the Denver place, which we did, and then using that money to buy a place in Sanibel for the winter. I guess that's it. Not sure. Probably monthly. I don't know. I'll say it's a little challenging when I'm not doing a weekly show when you do the next show, because life is very busy, and I think I'll continue to follow topics. I really did want to talk about the Paperwhite because I've been thinking about it and using this review copy. So really glad to have a chance to talk to you about that. And the next thing that comes my way, Jerry Riddle's got a new book out. I'd love to talk to him again. And I'm just going to kind of follow my heart in figuring out the next thing to talk about. I am doing the morning journal each weekday. I love doing that. So you can ask your, turn her off here. You can ask your Alexa device to enable morning journal if you'd like to hear that. And then each morning you just say, Alexa flash, and you'll hear. I usually put it up around 7 a.m. and it's 5 minutes or less rumination on things that are of interest that particular day. It's been a really pleasing practice for me, and I appreciate those of you who are listening to it on a regular basis. That's it for the Kindle Chronicles. I'm Len Edgerly in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I really appreciate your listening to my podcast. Have a great day. Bye.